Hello everyone, this is Jay Wengro, and welcome to Think Like a Software Engineer, Episode 4. As you probably know, a software engineer writes code using a programming language. I always talk about how learning to code is not really about learning a new language. Instead, it's about learning the skill of talking to a computer. The programming language is simply the medium in which you can talk to a computer. But today I'm going to delve into a more nuanced point, and that is, although a programming language is called a language, and although we can describe what our code is doing in English or whatever our spoken language is, the software engineer understands that the actual code does not necessarily translate directly into English. Our code may read from left to right like English, but our computer doesn't necessarily process our code from left to right, and this can lead to some misunderstandings. Let me show you an example of code that reads just like English and thereby miss out on an opportunity for simplifying our code because we don't truly understand exactly how the computer processes it. Here is a simple bit of Python code, and it checks whether a variable, namely x, is equivalent to 7. If x is 7, the computer prints a response of true, and if it's not 7, the computer prints false. So let's read this code. If x is equal to 7, our code should print true. Else, meaning otherwise, the computer should print false. This code reads just like English, which makes it really easy to understand. In fact, nothing about how we described our code is inaccurate. However, by reading it just like English, we miss out on a useful nuance. And that nuance is that the computer does not process the statement, if x equals 7, as the English statement, if x is equivalent to 7. What it actually does is first process the x equals 7 as a separate expression. An expression is simply a unit of code that a computer can process. So the expression x equals 7 is actually useful unto itself even when removed from the context of the if statement. Let me show you what I mean. Let's print out x equals 7 and see what we get. As you can see, since x currently is 7, we get true. If we change x to something else, when we run the code, we get false printed to the terminal. So x equals 7 is actually a valid expression unto itself. It is the assertion that x is equivalent to 7. That's what x equals 7 means. It is an assertion that x is equal to 7. So therefore, if x is indeed 7, then Python processes this assertion as true, indicating that the assertion is correct. If x is not 7, then Python processes this assertion as false. The same is true for other examples as well, such as let's say x is greater than 5. X greater than 5 is a valid expression unto itself that represents the assertion that x is greater than 5. This assertion will be processed by Python as true or false, depending on whether x is actually greater than 5 or not. So, the statement, if x equals 7, is not exactly the English statement, if x is 7. Instead, Python first processes the expression, x equals 7, as true or false. So even though in English we read from left to right, here Python actually processes the x equals 7 first before putting it together with the if statement. So x equals 7, Python processes it as true. And our code, therefore, is actually saying if true. Or in the case that x is not 7, Python first processes x equals 7 as false, and it's as if our code is saying if false. And while it may seem that I'm being pedantic, we can actually use this knowledge to make our code much simpler and sweeter. Instead of what we have here, we can instead simply say print x equals 7. Since x equals 7 is an expression that Python will evaluate and translate into either true or false depending on whether x is 7, we can remove the if and the else statements entirely and just use this single line, which accomplishes the exact same thing as what we had before. So as a software engineer, by leveraging our understanding of how code actually gets processed, we can write simpler, more concise, and more readable code. Thank you for joining me, and I'm looking forward to our next episode next week.